Welcome, everyone, to the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vive. Squid, back in lockdown. World Juniors canceled. Olympic hockey with the pros canceled. Lots of NHL games canceled or moved. However, the Maple Leafs come back after 2 weeks, roll over Ottawa. Life is good in Leafland right now.
Yeah, it is, and I mean the fact that they were off as long as they were, and of course most of the teams were off at some point this year for several weeks, but they played pretty darn good. But I gotta say that Ottawa didn't look very good that night, from their goaltender all the way out.
No, you're right there. So Toronto got a little bit of a scare with a rapid test for Austin Matthews 2 days ago, which came back negative today. So he's in the lineup tonight. But the Edmonton Oilers aren't quite so fortunate with 97 sitting out.
Unfortunately, now the good part is there's no people in the building, no fans, because they'd be a little disappointed if they were going to that game and McDavid wasn't playing. So
very true.
I don't know if that's good or bad for the Oilers, because sometimes, as we talked about a while ago, when your top player's out, the team seems to play a little bit harder and so on. And then you got guys up from the minors that are trying to prove themselves that they belong in the National League. So it could work out in their favor, or it could go drastically against them. And if the Leafs play like they did against Ottawa, I don't think they'll have any problems.
Yeah, we were talking about that off air, but I just wanted to alert you to the Pittsburgh game earlier in the season when the scenario was almost unfolding the same way, and we know the results of that. But the good news is that since that time, they've been one of the hottest teams in the National Hockey League. So while we're talking about teams, an unfamiliar sight for us, which seems to be unfolding in Edmonton. Lots of pressure on the coach throwing some barbs at the goalie, which was apparently misconstrued by the interview, which is not surprising the way the media can twist things the way they want it. The goalie responding as you would expect he would, finally had enough, and he did stick up for himself, not taking any more of the heat. But with all that sounding around the team, it makes me nervous. Mike Babcock's name's being thrown around because of his past association with Ken Holland. But aside from all of that and all the nonsense that we're used to usually seeing here in Toronto, or have been for many, many years, everything runs through McDavid and Drysdale. They seem to be very top-heavy, no secondary scoring, which seems to have dried up a little bit. They had coming from Hyman and even from Nugent Hopkins. The Leafs have been labeled that way themselves, and I think now it's shifted to the West.
Well, they've done a heck of a job making those third and fourth lines better. And when you look at their bottom six forwards now, you don't look at them and say, wow, they're not that good. I think that gap, like I said before, between the first line and the fourth line has drastically gotten thinner. And that means that the third and fourth line have gotten that much better. They have more speed. They play that kind of in-your-face type of game, and they're able to frustrate you. And they do a pretty darn good job of it, too.
Well, I'll take it one step further. If the play of Ilya Mikheyev the other night is any indication of what's to come, they may have found that missing piece on the second line. Not to get too excited because it's only one game, but the power play goal and the shorthanded goal, he's let me know that he's got to stay healthy first and foremost because he has a habit of getting these very unusual injuries. But he sure served notice. He isn't about to give up his spot just yet.
No, he certainly didn't. And you know what? He's a good body to have back, too. I mean, he's a guy that can kill penalties. He's a guy who can play good defense. He plays a rather physical game. He can skate like heck. So, I mean, you know, when you throw a guy into the lineup like that, and he's hungry, too, because he sees all these guys, and he goes, where do I fit in?
Yeah.
I've got to make a spot for myself. And he went out and did that. Let's see if he can continue doing that night after night after night. And if he's able to, then he's gonna grab one of those spots.
And he's got one in his hands. It's there for his taking if he wants. It's his job to lose. Let's put it that way. Which brings us to the odd man out, Nick Ritchie. Not surprisingly, the first of many healthy scratches, I would suggest, until he's probably, unfortunately, waived. But the way the world is today, 34's rapid test was positive 2 days ago. All of a sudden, Richie found back in the lineup of the fourth line as far as practice went. So, who knows?
No. Well, I think with Matthews getting the PCR results and being negative, and he's going to be in the lineup, that I think Richie will be scratched once again. And more than likely, in due time, he'll probably be put on waivers more than likely. And I don't anticipate anybody in the league picking him up at $2.5 million.
Yeah.
But you never know. You never know, though. But the good part is, if he doesn't get picked up and he goes to the minors, his salary doesn't count on the Leafs salary cap.
Yeah, so if they can eliminate that, that'll be a bit. And I would suggest that's where it seems to be leaning. He's just making too much for what he's producing or contributing to the lineup at this point. And unlike the play of Camp Bunting and Cachet, they continue to prove by the shift, and their confidence is building by the shift. They now hang on to the puck a little longer. They're trying to make plays, all the things you want to see in the development of a player, especially in a lineup like this that's just very potent on the top end. And they're very responsible on their own end. They're given everything that they've been asked and then more, and it just seems to be improving as the games go on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that third line is a real good, effective line, and they're going out getting the job done. They're getting on loose pucks. They're forechecking. They're tiring out the opposition's D-man because they dump it in and they hound the puck. They're doing a great job, and again, like I said, that line, and then you got your fourth line's a little bit quicker than it was with Thornton or whoever on the left side. They just got that much closer to the first line, and when you have four lines that are that close on any given night, you can probably beat anybody.
Well, as a former frontline player yourself, how much respect did you have for those third line guys, especially when they were rewarded with scoring a goal or picking up a few points every now and then?
I loved it. I mean, we all did. We all, the funny thing is, we all cheered for those guys because, we were lucky that, we had enough talent and worked hard enough that we stayed on those, top line or top two lines. These guys didn't, unfortunately. And a lot of times these guys were all on, well, not even just them, but the majority of the team were on two-way contracts.
Yeah.
And they could get anybody to the minors back then on recallable waivers, and these guys wanted to stay in the National League. So, it's just human nature. We were pulling for those guys to do well, and when they produced offense for us, and it was that much better.
Well, I bring that up only because the last two games, that guy in the Leafs was not a forward, it was more along a defenseman in the form of TJ Brody, who scored in Edmonton, seemed like 40 games ago he did that, and the response from the bench was eruptive. The other night, the same, makes a tremendous play breaking up a 2-on-1, then picks up two shorthanded assists on the same penalty, adds a goal later. The reaction of his teammates was of great respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you see a guy that plays the way he does and puts his body on the line defensively night in and night out, and just he's responsible, he doesn't do anything fancy. But when he gets a goal or gets a point and has a big game like that point-wise, you can't help but feel real good for the guy because he doesn't usually get those kind of accolades. And for me, that was the same when I played. Those guys didn't get a lot of accolades. So when they did, like I remember Greg Carrion. I mean, he was a checking guy, but he'd go out some nights and he'd be the best offensive guy on the ice. And you couldn't help but love that for him.
Well, the other guy that came to mind that you played with here was Bob McGill. I mean, there was a guy that did anything to help the team, fight anybody, including a Bob Probert. I saw him one night where Probert, there was a battle going on. McGill had fought already. Probert was challenging Leaf bench. He turned around, took his helmet off, skated around the pile, and fought Probert again. And that was a moment to me where he earned the respect of the hockey club, the fans, even management. And he did what it takes. So I can't imagine you guys in the dressing room weren't just looking at him with the utmost respect.
Oh, absolutely. And Bobby, he would do whatever he needed to do for us to win. And those are the guys you want on your hockey team. And then he was in the trade with me to Chicago. But before that, we swept Chicago one year in the first round of the playoffs. It was a best of 5. I think they finished about 40 points ahead of us.
Yes.
But we just snuck into the playoffs.
Remember.
And we went in there and won the first 2 games. Well, you know what? A lot of that was because he got, what's his name? The left winger that played with Savard and Larmer. Tough kid.
Secord.
He got Secord off his game for those entire 3 games. He fought him several times. He was always bugging him. And Secord was more involved with Bob McGill than he was in playing the game. And I attribute that to the biggest part of us sweeping that series.
Well, that's one of the biggest compliments you can give a player, because where I was going with all this is the players know. They know who does the thankless work, that doesn't show up on the score sheet, but is instrumental to any success the team may have or is having. And that, to me, speaks volumes.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows better than the players that are in the room every day with those guys. They know what they do. They know what they put out for the team to win. And like I said, you can't help but pull for those guys. I mean, you joke around sometimes because some of them don't. Well, in my day anyway, there were several guys that didn't have much skill and they were there for other reasons. You don't see that in today's game hardly at all. But, we would tease them once in a while. Yeah. But, hey, we love those guys because those are the guys that were there night in and night out and put in the work.
Well, looking at this edition, do you think, Mr. Dubas, we've talked about this and we've talked about this a lot off the air. He has a move or two to make before the trade deadline. The forwards seem to be coming around very nicely. The D, while holding up, still appears a little light depth-wise.
Yeah, I would. If I can't speak for Kyle, obviously, because I'm not Kyle. But if I was put me in his shoes right now, and I would be scouring the league for one good defenseman and maybe another guy that would be a depth guy that I could count on if there was injuries. I may have to give up a couple of draft picks or a couple of prospects or maybe even a player off the team. But, if it helps the team depth-wise on defense, because as you said, the forwards, they're fine. They could move one guy and they've still got a ton of depth up front. So I'm not so much worried about their forwards at all. It's a depth of the defense that would be my worry going into the playoffs.
Well, the delay that we've had in all these games with the 8 games they've missed, they've only played 31, so a long way to go still, but it sure doesn't feel like it. It feels like the needle must move a little faster. Can't allow Tampa and Florida to get away in the standings. Want to avoid a first-round matchup. They all do, by the way. All 3 of them do not want to play each other, and with either of those 2 finishing second or third, along with – you want to be first. However, you don't want to be so consumed with the division there's nothing left at the end. Why depth and bounce the rest of the way is so critical?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and the good thing about having that depth is that you can, as you get further down the road and then you maybe add more depth on the defense, hopefully, then, going into the last part of the season, if you've got a pretty good hold on that first place, then you can tinker with your lineup a little bit, give some guys a little bit of rest going down the stretch, get ready for playoffs. And depth allows you to do that. Or unless they just, run away and a month and a half out, or a month out, they're sitting so far up in first place and they probably can't be caught. Well, then they could do that as well.
But I think the other key is also you've just touched on it, is that some of these taxi squad guys or these Marlies, yet they have to get some minutes. And even from the net, we got to get Joseph Woll back in again to see what he can do. You got to have these guys prepared for insurance, especially going into the second half of this season. It also keeps everybody hungry for ice time as well.
Yeah, and I think, right now I don't think you can afford to do that, Mike, to be honest with you. I mean, you have the taxi squads and they're there for a reason in case of COVID positives or what have you. I don't think you can afford to do that right now. Right now you got to put the pedal to the metal and go and win as many games as you can in the next month and a half, and then see where you're at that point, before you decide that you're going to give guys some ice time and so on. I really think that they've got to go for everything right now.
Well, I think one of the, I guess maybe I should explain a little further. Where I was talking about is maybe the bottom three guys on the forwards. You can shuffle them around a little bit, like the Leafs were doing with the D when everybody was healthy, and they're moving him in and out of the lineup. That 7-8 guy. That just made it, just kept everybody a little bit more on edge, a little bit more alert. And to me, it just kept everybody involved. So when somebody did have to step into the lineup, it wasn't the transition was a lot more seamless.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. And yeah, they could probably take her with their fourth line and get a few forwards and put them into those situations. But you got to have the right guys to do that too.
No, you're right.
You don't want to put a guy. You don't want to put a guy who's, a potential first or second line type player and put him into a fourth line position where he's playing 8 minutes or 7 or 8, 9 minutes a night and not getting, and then he'll get frustrated. And then when you have to put him in because of an injury or something, well, then he's not going to have the confidence to go and do what he's supposed to do.
No, you're right. That's a very good point. But the good news is they're on the right side of the winning ledger so far. Got a tough 4-game schedule coming up, moving into Colorado, Vegas, St. Louis, and Arizona, who always all play them tough, especially on the road. So that's going to be a true test in the next week and a half. So we'll see where that all unfolds. So, folks, in Squid, it's that time again. That time of the show. The theme.
Bring it on.
I think our theme today, we agree, is to push forward. So with that in mind, here's today's quote of the week. We cannot control the outcome, but we are 100% in control of the effort.
Perfect.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Oh, I just
did. Nobody could say it any better. I mean, that was perfect.
I stole it from
and it's so
else.
true.
I like that.
It's so true. It's just like, when you go from a player and you get your first coaching job and then you get frustrated because you're not able to go out on the ice and make things happen. It's like,
that's right.
It's a helpless feeling for a while, and then you get used to it and it gets a little bit better. But boy, oh boy, at first it was very, very difficult to realize that, hey, I don't have any, I can't go out and impact this game. I got to count on all these guys in front of me. So, but I love that. I think it's great because you're absolutely right. How many times have we seen harder working teams that are less talented beat other teams? Many, many times.
All the time.
And so hard work can overcome skill and speed and whatever you want to throw at them on most nights.
I mean, it's human nature.
But you have that skill. But you have that skill and speed, and you're the hardest working team. Well, then you're really good.
No, but then individually too, you're watching a guy out there who may be vying for your spot. You can't control that. You can't control or stop the fact that he may go and score 2 goals or 3 goals, or 3 may go in off his leg or his ass or head or something. You can't control that. But what you can control is the effort you put when you get a chance to play. Yeah. And that's the key to a good coaching that allows these players to get those white noise thoughts out of their head and concentrate on the job at hand. And that's where I think if you keep the competitive fire going, that can be turned into a real positive.
Yeah, there's no question it can be. There's no doubt that, guys looking over their shoulder going, hey, there's 5 guys back there.
Absolutely.
And they all want my spot. Well, I'm not going to give it to them. So you just go out and do the work as hard as you possibly can and worry about the outcome later.
And I'll tell you about that. Mikhail looked every bit of that. Like I don't care what language he was saying in it. The end result was still very much the same. You can't have this spot. Not just yet.
Yeah. Well, that was one game. Let's see what happens over the next 5. I'll give him 5 more games. And if he continues to play the way he played the other night, then he won't be giving up that spot anytime soon.
Not anytime too soon. Well, folks, until next week, same time, same place. Don't forget to tune into this week's weekly podcast. Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan drops Fridays at 6 p.m. This week's guest, longtime minor league pro with almost 2,000 penalty minutes. He's got some doozy stories playing in the Quebec League, playing in the United Hockey League. And for those Danbury Trashers fans, that was the league. he played in, that they didn't cross paths, but there is some interesting stories coming out of that. He's now the head coach of the Cincinnati Cyclones, who Justin Vibe actually plays for. His name is Jason Payne. Listen in. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. And
a Toronto boy.
He's a Toronto boy.
And a Toronto boy. Yep.
Yes, Toronto born, Toronto guy, runs precision skating in Toronto on a summer basis. We talks all about that. So we got lots to talk about with him. Tune in, and again, we'll see you guys on next week.